From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Appreciate everyone for listening to the latest episode of the Wildcast podcast. Plenty to talk about on the basketball side of things. I decided this past weekend, you know what, we're not going to even do a mailbag because there's plenty to talk about in regards to Arizona basketball. So we're going to have Bruce Pascoe joining us later on in the podcast to talk about the men's basketball team and their latest weekend sweep over the Oregon schools. Now moving up to number 4 in the AP Top 25, Azuolas Tubelis, after putting up 40 points against Oregon, 19 points against Oregon State. He was named Pac-12 Player of the Week. So we're going to get into all the great things that happen on the men's basketball side of things later on in the podcast. And before we dive right into it, just want to remind everyone that it is springtime. It's very busy. So please download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. And for our weekly podcast, please be sure to subscribe to the Wildcast on Apple, Spotify. And I just discovered we're also on Audible, which is Amazon's podcasting platform. PJ Brown, star insider for the Arizona women's basketball team. PJ, so let's get right into it. First of all, big game this week. Stanford.
Huge game. Huge game.
Huge is a one way of putting it, a blunt way of putting it. This is, Stanford versus Arizona. Stanford's been the class of the Pac-12 under Tar Vanderveer for decades. They've been that gold standard in the Conference of Champions. But Arizona has been trying to get to that level, and we've seen Arizona beat the Cardinal at McKale Center once before, Ari McDonald's game winner. But, man, Stanford has always been that really good team. But Arizona feels really good about themselves, PJ, because they just swept the L.A. schools on the road, which is big time, and how they did it was very impressive.
Oh, absolutely. It was amazing to watch because if we've talked about Justin for the last month or so, like, who is this Arizona team? We can't wrap our heads around. They do all these different things. They come back, have these great comebacks. And then the previous Sunday, they lose a game to Washington State that really, on paper and in the game, had they done what we've seen them do before, they could have won that game. Yeah. So then to come to LA at the beginning of February, when it's such a long season, you're all trying to catch your breath and get that second wind. This is the most crucial point in the season for them to go into LA and sweep in LA after not being able to do it for 2 decades. That was huge for this team, not only for them figuring out who they are in this moment and for the rest of the season, but also for their confidence. What a huge confidence booster to knock off number 14 UCLA at the time, and then knock off a USC team that's scraping to take your spot. They've come out of sort of nowhere this year. SC is, we all knew they would be better, but this good where they knock off Colorado and Stanford when they were number 2. Those are 2 tough teams, and to go in there, take them both to overtimes, and come out of there with both of those wins, that says a lot about this team and where they are right now.
I feel like it was big for 2 veterans in particular. Kate Reese scoring 33 against USC on Sunday, and then UCLA. I think Shayna Pellington played terrific down the stretch. We saw they made 10 for 10 free throws down the stretch. But Shayna Pellington had a big role in that. So I think now that you're in early February, you're looking for people that you can really rely on in close games and wild games. NCAA tournament, anything can happen. So when you have the ability to do stuff like that and your veterans kind of rise to the top, I think that bodes well for this team.
Absolutely. And when you look at both of them, Shayna's been pretty steady the entire year. She's been leading this team, not only getting her points, but also distributing so others can eat, as they say.
Yeah, everybody eats.
Everybody eats. But this is that team, right, where everybody eats. When you look at both of these games, even though Kate Reese had 33 points on Sunday, and Shayna did what Shayna did Friday night, everybody played their role. Jade Lavelle getting these crazy baskets, 3-pointers, when people are all over her, hand in the face, everything. Maya Nagy stepping up and getting a deep 2 to send the game into another overtime on Sunday. Everybody seemed to do what they were supposed to do in that moment. This was team ball. Even though we have these great individual performances, it was totally team ball. And it's the first time that we've seen this from an Arizona team, really, that they're not relying on one person, this is completely different. And I think this is part of why it's been hard to figure out who this team is and what they look like, just because they have so many weapons. When they put it all together and everybody does their part, they can beat teams like UCLA, USC, and let's say it, possibly Stanford on Thursday night.
Mm-hmm. Well, now let's talk about that game. So Stanford, Tara Vanderveer, they have so many really talented players. Haley Jones. How long has she been at Stanford?
I think this is her 5th year.
Okay, because she's like one of those players, and she's been elite every single year that she's been there, but it feels like she's been there for like a decade. And, I remember in the preseason when they were talking about, all conference teams and who's going to be standouts, and they were talking about Haley Jones. And I'm like, wait, she's still on the team? I thought she was playing in the WNBA, but no, she's back at Stanford. And Arizona's going to have their work cut out for them. I know that McKale Center is going to be packed. Adia Barnes and the players on the team are doing a really good job of marketing that game. It's going to be on national TV. So this is as good as it gets. But Stanford's a really good team. In Arizona, they're feeling really good about themselves. However, we've seen this, both men and women's teams. Sometimes they feel really good about themselves, and then they get served a slice of humble pie. So how do you kind of make sure that you're feeling very confident without, I guess, maybe being a little bit hungover?
Yeah, I think that's an Adia Barnes question, right? She preaches this. She's preached this since the year that they only won 6 games. You never get too high and you never get too low. She allows the team to celebrate, right? They celebrated their wins this weekend, but you know what? And then they came home and they slept because they played god-awful minutes, right? Yeah. They played with all those 3 overtimes.
Yeah.
And then they're back looking at film, and they're on to the next. That's already behind them. So that's how she's always coached this team, is that you never get too low after a bad loss. You never get too high off of a good loss. You just kind of stay steady, and that seems to carry them through. I don't think there will be a hangover on Thursday night from this team. I just think that they're ready to play whoever's in front of them. And it just happens that it's Stanford and it's on ESPN.
So what's the significance behind a game like this on a Thursday? Usually it's on Friday, Sunday, but now we're seeing Arizona versus Stanford on Thursday. Right.
There should be a lot more eyeballs on it because it's on ESPN. Although when you look at the East Coast, it's starting at 9:30. It starts 7:30 here. So hopefully people will be up and be able to be willing to stay up and watch this game, because it's set up to be a really good matchup. Stanford coming off a really tough loss to Washington. They want to right the ship, and they're trying to figure themselves out too. Yeah. The beginning of the Pac-12 season, they really weren't playing that well, and they got knocked off by USC. But there were a number of games before that where they weren't playing that well. Heck, Cal took them. They only beat Cal by like 4 points. So this is a team with all that talent, all those All-Americans, all those McDonald's All-Americans on that team, still trying to figure out their identity, still trying to figure out who they can rely on when. This is what coaches across the country, face day in and day out. And when you think that Stanford is doing that, you better believe it that Arizona's doing it too. Yeah. So it's just trying to find your way. And And then you have Arizona feeling some confidence at this point, feeling that, they can make this season special at this point. They've got 18 wins, two more wins in the season. And Adia Barnes has won 20 games for the last 5 seasons. She's already the only coach who's done it 4 seasons consecutively. Now she's going to do it. She's on the precipice, if you can say that word, of doing it 5 straight years. That's huge for the program and huge for this team. And so they've got only 6 more games in this regular season.
Yeah.
I'm not a betting person, but I bet that they win 20 games plus a few more this season. And whether or not that's Thursday, we have to see. Anything can happen on any given day. That's why they play the games. That's what my dad always taught me. And that's why sports and basketball are so fun to watch, because you never know when somebody's going to all of a sudden step up. Kate Reese had the 33-point game the other night, right? Maddie Connor's been really hot as of late. Shayna's been doing great things. Jade Lavelle, you look at this team, it's player after player doing things, and you just don't know whose night it's going to be Thursday night.
How many McDonald's All-Americans are going to be on the court between Arizona and Stanford?
Well, that's interesting. So Arizona has 3 right now. It's Paris Clark, Maya Nagy, and of course, Kate Reese.
Yeah.
And I think that Stanford has either 12 or 15. I haven't gone back to count it. That's going to be a number for the game day this week.
I was going to say,
it's going to be a number. That's definitely a number, but it's going to be a ton of them. And to think about, if you go to Stanford, unless you come in at a certain point, like Haley Jones came in and she basically started right away, so she's been starting forever. But if you're Lauren Betts, who was the number 1 player in last year's recruiting class, and you're sitting on the bench behind Cameron Brink,
man,
that's pretty tough, right?
Yeah. A lot of burgers on the court is what we're going to say on Thursday. A lot of burgers on the basketball court at McKale Center. But overall, though, Arizona, where are they at in the AP Top 25? Do they move up to number 14?
They're 17.
They're 17 now?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about just where they're at right now? Because we're in the final stretch of the season. Yeah. So we got 1 month, really, until NCAA tournament starts. Where do you think that they're going to be seated just on their current trajectory right now?
Well, it's very interesting because Thursday night at halftime of this game, the top 16 will have their first reveal from the NCAA selection committee. And we'll see if they make that or not. They're either going to be just in or just out, depending. And remember that the selection committee reviews everything. So they're going to look at that. What do I keep saying? They're going to look at that loss at Utah by 1 point, and that's going to count more than some win at home.
Yeah.
Because that's more important. They're going to look at this weekend taking these 2 teams to overtimes and winning. They're going to look at everything, and they're either just going to be in or they're going to be really close to being in. I do think that, obviously they're making the NCAA tournament. I think they're really close to hosting. It's funny because when you look at last year, Kate Reese went down and dislocated her shoulder and was out, and they didn't finish well, and they hosted. The year before, it was all the NCAA was all in San Antonio, but they would have hosted. And Arizona typically hasn't finished their February well, the regular season's well. They usually finish on a loss or a couple losses or something like that. And yet, like last year, they took into consideration that their best player was injured. So I think that the NCAA selection committee really scours everything and really looks at it and weighs it to see who should be hosting and who shouldn't. And if this is a year that Arizona finishes strong, I would imagine that they would host. I mean, it just makes sense. They're very close right now. They're coming off of some really good wins. They've got 6 games left. If they go 4-3, if they go 5-1, if they go if they go 3-3, I think they have a really good resume to host.
So when is that selection show, or not selection show, but the early reveal for
the
top
first
16?
reveal will be at halftime of Thursday's game. The second reveal is February 23rd at the halftime of another game. I think Tennessee is playing.
I'm willing to bet that Arizona won't be in this time, but they'll be in the next time. Because let's say they put up a decent performance against Stanford, and then they beat the brakes off of Cal. I think then, you split that impressive series, then the committee is going to be feeling pretty good about yourself. And then you got Utah and Colorado at home, and then you said halftime on February 23rd, they're playing against Oregon that day. So, and that game is also on a Thursday as well. So I think at that point, Arizona will probably be in that top 16. But, man, it's really tough. It's really tough. And
it is.
And if they beat Stanford on Thursday, they're certainly going to be in the top 16.
If they beat Stanford, they're hosting.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. They're hosting. And but yet they have a good enough resume that I believe that they could host anyway.
Yeah.
And it's been really weird. Everybody's been beating themselves up this season. So
it's the Pac-12 at its finest.
Yeah, not only the Pac-12, but look at the rest of the country. I mean, it's been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So it will be an interesting. At the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see who really ends up hosting, because there's parity right now.
No doubt. All right, well, PJ Brown stopping by at the Arizona Daily Star studio, talking all things Arizona women's basketball on the Wildcast. Arizona versus Stanford at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday at McKale Center. Adia Barnes is campaigning for a sellout, so get your tickets and go watch the game. It's going to be a good one. I'm actually going to be doing like a Arizona Mega Day observation story. So you got softball playing, and you got women's basketball against Stanford, and then Arizona men's basketball is on the road in the Bay Area. So for an Arizona Wildcats fan, Thursday is going to be a busy day for viewing purposes. So,
and if you go to the game, don't forget to wear your red. They've called for a red out, even though
they're playing Stanford,
and which seems really odd. So make sure it's Arizona red and not Stanford red.
Yeah,
or there'll be an issue.
Yeah, go lighter on the red. If you're
like a real red, bright red.
Like turn up, put together all your red shirts on like your bed or something, and then pick the lightest red, and then wear that one. They should have done blue.
I know, it makes no sense.
Yeah,
blue. It should have been a blue out.
Blue out. All right. Well, Arizona will take on Stanford at 7:30 p.m. At McKale Center. Make sure you check out PJ's coverage of that game on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. All right, let's talk about the men's basketball side of things as they get ready to take on the Bay Area, and we're going to do that with Bruce Pascoe coming up next. All right, and now we got Bruce Pascoe joining us here to talk about Arizona men's basketball. Arizona has now won 6 straight games, 3 consecutive sweeps. Now they got to go on the road to the Bay Area, and that bodes well for Umar Ballo to have an impressive performance, because we all saw what he did last year as the backup big for Arizona. But I think I'm bearing the lead here, Bruce. I think the big story regarding this program right now is the rise of Azuolas Tubelis. And at the start of the season, I sat down and talked with him about just where his mind is at. And he said that the NCAA tournament showed him a lot of things. And it really humbled him. That toughness, playing tough, like these things matter in basketball. And Azuolas Tubelis got tougher in the offseason, spent a lot of time in the weight room, spent a lot of time in the gym, became an absolute gym rat, and now he's starting to enjoy the fruits of his labor. And he's always been consistent all year long. He's scored in double figures in every single game this season. But, man, Bruce, it seems like ever since the turn of the calendar in 2023, Azuolas Tubelis has been an absolute animal. He's putting up, I think, 7 double-doubles in the last 10 games. And we saw him put up 40 points effortlessly against Oregon last week. And he could have put up 50 if he really wanted to. But at the end of the day, I think Azuolas Tubelis has shown that he's not only Pac-12 Player of the Year, but an All-American and a guy who can make a case for National Player of the Year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I
Zach
think it's
Edey's
been
tough.
said that if Edey didn't exist, then it would, he'd have a really good argument for it. But it's hard to argue against Edey, at least the way he's played to date. But Tubelis is right behind him. Maybe there's some others around it, but you got, as of right now, you would think he was definitely in that top 5. That top 5 first team All-American category. That's where he's at. And you're right. It's exactly because of what he's done. Frankly, is more than anything just the last 6-7 weeks in Pac-12 play. At a time when you're kind of hitting that mid-season where it's been a few months since you've been working full time. You're maybe going to let up a little bit. You don't have the adrenaline rush of the late season and the postseason. A lot of times guys will kind of hit a wall or slump in that period. He has not. He has gone the other direction. And I think there has been some reference to, that those 2 games last year, TCU and Houston, really drove him the offseason. I think they keep him motivated, and he's made some references to that as well. And, and I think obviously he's been around, his skills are getting better. He's worked on things. I mean, he's almost making it look easy. Some of these double doubles he's putting up, it's like, what? He had a double double, I think, and the other night, against Oregon State, he didn't get a double-double, but he only played 23 minutes because they were blowing him out, and he still scored 19 points. And I think Tommy Lloyd said it was the quietest 19 he'd ever seen or something like that, and it was.
Yeah.
But that's just where he's at. And you're right, it's a big deal. I think, he's starting to get some national attention this week, and we'll see. It's always hard for guys out here to if they don't have the preseason hype, which some Arizona players and teams have over the years. If you don't have the preseason hype, it's really hard to build it during the season if you're out here because, frankly, half of the country is literally sleeping on you. It's just the way it is with the time zones.
I know Arizona fans probably don't want to hear this, but could Azuolas Tubelis possibly, at this point, play his way into NBA draft discussion? Because it all depends on the type of fit. I'm not saying that Azuolas Tubelis is a surefire first-round pick, but at the way that he's playing, there might be a team that looks at Azuolas Tubelis and say, we might need a guy like this. Yeah. And he's playing some good basketball. 40 points, Bruce, and didn't even knock down a three-pointer. Yeah. If he has that element to his game over. He's going to be an NBA player. But even if he doesn't have that dimension, how he's been able to play, it's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about the 40 is just there were no shots really forced. I mean, I think he took a 3 that maybe was kind of tough. I don't know, but it's just like he was just taking what was there, and guys weren't forcing it to him either. And to your point earlier, that nobody even knew that there was any kind of record on the line, and they would have. I mean, because I remember sitting there those last couple of possessions when Kriisa took the threes, and we're all looking around like, how come they're not getting the ball to Tubelis for that record? But they didn't know. So, there's that. But as far as the NBA, I think, entering the season, I think my questions were, can he defend a 4 in the NBA? Can he stretch a little bit and shoot a little bit more often on the, mid-range 3-point than he does? But, he doesn't really need to as much in the system. But I think, but he's been so efficient and so easy to score, and, he can handle a lot of different matchups, guys defending him. It's hard to see how somebody now doesn't maybe take a chance on him. And I go to what Kyle Smith from Washington State said a couple weeks ago. He said he was talking about some NBA scouts earlier this season, I think, or maybe in the offseason, were like, nah, Tubelis isn't an NBA player. And Kyle Smith says, what are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. He scores and rebounds so easily, and he's fast. And that's the other thing, that sometimes we don't talk about. I mean, for his size, he's remarkably quick, and those skills got to get him somewhere, you'd think. I mean, at the bottom, I would think if he wanted to leave now, you would see him at least going somewhere in the second round, maybe in the middle to high parts of it, just because somebody probably does see a need, and there's not that much risk investing on a guy at that point of the draft. And I mean, he could possibly go higher if he, if there's some other things in his game, and we'll see. A lot of times guys can really add to their stock in the late season and the postseason as well, and that'll be big for him as well.
Do you buy into East Coast bias? Do you think that it's a real thing? Because Arizona plays a lot of these games super late in the middle of the week. Like the last few Thursdays games, I mean, we're getting another late Thursday night game, and Azuolas Tubelis is putting up 40 points while everyone on the East Coast time zone is all asleep. And I at first I thought, Arizona fans might have been blowing it out of proportion. But then I was just curious, Bruce. I turned on College Game Day this past Saturday. I'm like, okay, less than 48 hours after Azuolas Tubelis drops 40, let's see what they talk about. And they were at Duke for Duke, North Carolina, which was the most underwhelming Duke, North Carolina matchup of all time, in my opinion. Yeah. And then they talked about Zach Edey and the numbers that he's putting up. And that's totally fine because Zach Edey's putting up impressive numbers. Mm-hmm. But not a single mention of Azuolas Tubelis. And maybe I missed it, but I sat there and I had it on the background and I did not hear anyone talk about Azuolas Tubelis. And to me, that's where I kind of understood why Arizona fans kind of feel like they're kind of forgotten about in terms of the national picture.
I think it's. I don't think it's much as a bias. It's just that more people live in that part of the country, and it's 2 hours later than here, and 3 hours later than Pacific Coast. And what are you going to do? That's just people are. Yeah, like I said, they're literally sleeping on them. And the same thing happens. I go back to when Derek Williams was blowing up his. I think it was his sophomore year after he had already established himself as a really, really good player. It didn't seem like he got a lot of national attention until Arizona went to North Carolina State in Raleigh and played a day game Eastern time on a Saturday, and I think it was on ESPN2 or something, and then he started blowing up, and it's like, what? Did you guys not know how good he was until you saw him in your backyard at 2:00 Eastern time? And that's maybe what it takes. And I think, and Tommy Lloyd said the other piece of this is, and sort of what I alluded to earlier. Preseason hype has a lot to do with it too. I mean, think about entering the season. It was all about Oscar Tshiebwe's coming back. Oh my God, he's going to be a monster. Trace Jackson Davis is unbelievable. And then a lot of talk about Edey, although frankly he's probably exceeded that. But I don't think there was that much buzz about Tubelis entering this season. Yeah. And so he has to build it. And how do you build it when you're playing games at 11 o'clock Eastern time? That's really hard. And finally it's coming out, and it will come out. Now that he hit this national radar, I think, with this performance, and then certainly in the tournament that will help as well. So it's just taking time. But the thing is, the guys know and the coaches know. The NBA guys know all this stuff. They don't care who's rated or whatever. Yeah. They know who's good, who's going to be good, who they want to draft, and that's really what matters, at least to the players. They all want to get to the NBA and make money.
But it's not just the Azuolas Tubelis playing well too. I think Arizona collectively is starting to turn somewhat of a corner. I think the lineup change did Arizona some good, putting Pelle Larsson on the bench and putting Cedric Henderson in the lineup. Tommy Lloyd called Henderson the Energizer Bunny of Arizona, and Pelle Larsson gives them a consistent player who can play a little bit of everything coming off the bench. And then Kylan Boswell and his defense is really starting to take flight here. And it just seems like everyone's more polished. Everyone's not thriving right now, but it's not as rough as it used to be. Kirk Reese is putting up better shooting numbers. Same with Courtney Ramey, but they're also playing better defense. So right now, I think Arizona's feeling pretty good about themselves. Still plenty of work to be done before they get ready for the big dance. But, I mean, shoot, 3 straight sweeps. Arizona's rocking and rolling right now.
Yeah, I mean, 2 factors. Yeah, you touched on both, the defense and the lineup change. And they're kind of related in a sense, but I think they just, they had that potential defensively. I think a lot of it, frankly, is just focus and wanting to be better defensively. It's not really too complicated. There's maybe some little subtleties as the season's gone on, as they've adjusted to be a little bit different defensively without Koloko in the middle. That's been an issue. And then the lineup change, not only does Henderson appear to be more comfortable and more energetic starting, he was a little cold and didn't have as much coming off the bench before, and also it's helped Larsson in the sense that he brings more energy to the bench. He's more versatile. You can put him in the game and have him guard literally almost anybody except a 7-footer probably. And so you have him coming off the bench. It makes the bench more powerful. And I think Jack Murphy said something yesterday about how it's also helped Larsson in the sense that he doesn't have to worry as much about foul trouble. Sometimes he's had problems, as some guys do. They pick up an early foul, and it spooks them the rest of the game. They're thinking about it in the back of their mind. He doesn't have to do that because he doesn't come in till 15 minutes or whatever. And at that point, he's ready to go. So, it appears to be, bottom line is, it appears to be working for both guys, which is helping the team.
Absolutely. Kirk Reese and his numbers have gotten better. What do you make of just his play? And I know he's kind of a polarizing figure for a lot of people. It seems like a lot of people either love him or they hate him. But I think he's a valuable asset for Arizona, especially the last few games.
Yeah, I mean, he's, I think it's just, it's easy to he's made some kind of ill-advised passes and he's missed some threes, and you say, okay, well, the threes are whatever, but he shoots threes well enough that you have to respect him. The defenses have to respect him, and that helps the rest of the offense. So that's working. And then, for the most part, his distribution. I mean, he's leading the Pac-12 in assists. His assist to turnover isn't terrific. It's better than 2-1 though, I think. So it's still pretty good. And he's just, and leadership wise, I think he's just, there's a lot of kind of nice guys who work hard on this team. Kreese is the one guy probably more than anybody who just likes to get out there and chatter, and he has that swagger to him. And I think this team needs a little bit of that. And I think Tommy Lloyd knows that. And so I don't think, even though early in the year he was struggling a little more, that I don't think there's ever any doubt that they were going to reduce his role. He's the guy, and he's still going to be the guy. And that is what it is, and he's shooting better now, so maybe the arguments get quieter. I know I get fewer emails about him than I did earlier in the year.
On the same night that he touched a referee on the nose when they were having an exchange about like a flagrant foul or something like that, and they were reviewing it, and Kirk Kreese he actually goes up and touches the referee on the nose, and the referee's totally cool with it. That same night, he shows up to a press conference wearing a fur coat, and he's also very funny too. That's the thing about Kirk Kreese, is he's very quick-witted, and we were asking,
and he's candid. He doesn't.
He's very candid.
A lot of times
very
guys
genuine.
are they're cautious in what they say to us, and but he likes to have fun with it. So and I think that translates to fun for everybody. People can relate to him better. He's a real person,
Yeah. Well, Azuolas Tubelis is a very stoic person. I think that's not really a secret. And someone asked him after the Oregon game, well, does Azuolas ever get excited about anything? And Kirk Kreese said, Azuolas Tubelis screams through the microphone whenever we play Fortnite and we get a win.
Right.
Or, when they asked him about, I think it might have been you, Bruce, you asked him about getting better defensively, and he said, Azuolas, he scored 40. He only talks about offense.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the defense. But defensive efficiency has been in kind of a newer stat in college basketball. I think Seth Davis pointed this out the other day, that Arizona on January 18th was ranked 88th in defensive efficiency. Now they're ranked number 1 in college basketball. I'm not sure if that ranking still holds true for defensive efficiency. That was according to Seth Davis. That was his tweet. I'm sure that could have changed since then, but I mean, they've climbed in terms of defensive efficiency.
Yeah, national. I'm looking at right now. They're at 36 now. They were in the 80s, I think, maybe at the worst. And I just found out the other day. I actually wrote Ken Pomeroy an email. I was like, "Can I research these archives?" And he actually has a thing in there. You can actually go to the date and find out what their efficiency was on that date. But
wow,
it is something about. They basically jumped about 50 points, and I think. In the Pac-12 right now, they are 4th. I think they were a little higher, maybe before. I'm not sure, but anyway, that was weighted down pretty heavily by a team. That 36 is weighted down pretty heavily by a team that was not very efficient for the first half of the season. So, they're only going to get so high. But the fact is, I don't know if you could somehow separate out the last 6 weeks of their efficiency, that would be certainly in the top 20. You would think.
So Arizona now turns their attention to the Bay Area. You're very familiar with that part of the country, Bruce. Is this and so is Umar Ballo, quite frankly. Is this going to be the weekend of Umar Ballo dominating the Bay Area like he did last week or last year? What do you remember about that week?
Yeah, I mean, 21 at Stanford, and I think another 17 at Cal or something like that. And that was when, again, he was playing behind Koloko, and it wasn't like Koloko was, Koloko's out or in foul trouble or hurt or whatever. I don't think anyway. That really was sort of a coming out party for him. It was a real confidence booster. I had kind of forgotten about that until we were looking at these weekends, or this weekend. But it was kind of a turning point for him. I mean, he was helpful all last season to this team, but I think you saw it more in the late season. That Cal trip, I believe, was late January, and he kind of turned it on at that point, and it gave him a boost. Like, hey, I can do it on this level. I think it made a big difference. And as far as this weekend, it's. He should be. You would think the same thing. Him and Tubelis they could both potentially have double doubles against both of these teams. There's some, with Cal, it might be more a matter of, do they get up on Cal and rest the starters a lot like they did against Oregon State, and then at Stanford, they could run away from that game too, or they could get bogged down on a tough one. The Stanford's kind of can go either. They're kind of different team, tough to figure, but yeah, I would expect, and I think the matchups too individually with the bigs that he's going to be facing with each of those teams will be favorable for him. They're not guys that are going to be super quick or able to stretch him out on the perimeter or whatever. It'll be he'll be
absolutely.
I think they're good for him.
Absolutely. All right, let's see if Oumar Ballo can dominate again. Let's see if Azuolas Tubelis can keep up this play, and let's see if Arizona, quite frankly, can get another sweep. They've had 3 straight. Now they got to go to the Bay Area, and they've had a lot of success over the last several years in the Bay Area, no doubt about that. Yeah. Arizona takes on Cal on Thursday at 9 p.m., and then Stanford on Saturday at 6 p.m. The game on Thursday is on Pac-12 Networks. The game against Stanford is on ESPN2. Man, something about Stanford, Arizona. It's just good TV on ESPN. I always think of Tiger Woods sitting courtside wearing the backwards hat.
I mean, you talk about UCLA is the traditional rival, and maybe Oregon arguably has been the last 10 years, but there were some years there where the Arizona-Stanford was just unbelievable. Yeah,
Mike Montgomery, Lute Olson.
They beat each other on their own home floors, and yeah, you're right. Yeah, Tiger Woods, whatever. It was nuts. Those were the days. They're not like that anymore, at least up there.
Mike Montgomery coached at Cal and Stanford.
Yeah,
that's crazy. I don't think you'll ever see that ever again. A coach coaching at 2 rival schools.
It was strange, yeah. I mean, and in between, he stopped at the Golden State Warriors.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's
like imagine Sean Miller coaching ASU and also like the Phoenix Suns at the same time too.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. It is hard to imagine. I remember, the whole time it was like this doesn't seem right. Yeah.
All right, Bruce. Well, appreciate you stopping by. Safe travels. That's Bruce Pascoe, Arizona basketball insider from the Arizona Daily Star. Be sure to follow him on Twitter and check out his coverage of Arizona basketball on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. That'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play.